Hello and greetings to you all in the name of our Lord and our Saviour Jesus Christ. You join us in our hybrid Bible study as we venture into two chapters this time, chapters 40 and 41, where we will see Joseph interpreting various dreams. So we will start in chapter number 40. Sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker committed an offense against their lord, the king of Egypt. Now, in my translation, the English Standard Version, the ESV, we note against their Lord. Lord is in lowercase, of course, it's not against the one true God. Now, what's important to take note of here is that the king of Egypt in this era had a divine-like status. So, ruler in the earthly sense and even ruler in the eternal sense for the Egyptians. Now, Pharaoh was angry with the two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be with them, and he attended them. They continued for some time in custody. This, of course, reminds us of the previous chapter, which we looked at last week, chapter 39, verse 22, where the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. That reminds us, of course, of Joseph's obligation, so to speak, Joseph's position in the family household of Potiphar, and of course in the prison as well. He was very much highly regarded. Hence, that is why they were with Joseph, and that is why he attended to them. So one night in verse 5, they both had a dream, the cupbearer and the king, the baker of the king of Egypt. So Joseph goes up to them and says, "Why are your faces downcast today?" They said to him, "We have had dreams, and there is no one to interpret them." Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me." So two important things to take into consideration right here. As we talked about before, dreams in this culture, society at this time, were viewed as a way of divine revelation. We did talk about that before. But of course, with the cupbearer and the chief baker no longer out in the outside world, they would not have had access, of course, now to the magicians, the wise men who would have been able to interpret these dreams. These magicians who we are told about in Genesis chapter 41, verse 8, after Pharaoh had experienced his dreams, he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. So, very interesting thing to take into consideration there. And also, do not interpretations belong to God? Again, we are reminded of the many dreams that have taken place for Joseph, and of course we've heard about divine revelation up until this point in the book of Genesis as well. So we're told about the dreams, first and foremost, in verses 9 onwards. "In my dream," this is the cupbearer, "there was a vine before me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and the clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." Then Joseph gives him the interpretation, the 3 branches being 3 days. "In 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you back to your office, and you shall place Pharaoh's cup in his hand as he had done previously." And then he implores him to remember me when all is well with you, and please do me the kindness to mention me to Pharaoh so I can get out of this place. "For I was indeed stolen out of the land of the Hebrews." Of course, he was sold into slavery. "And he also had done nothing." Again, he had done nothing wrong. We remember talking about his wife last time. He created a scene, got him thrown into prison, and put me into the pit. The pit is the description here of the jail, prison, and of course is also a reminder of his being thrown into the pit, the cistern, by his brothers. The chief baker had heard this, and hearing a positive response, hearing that his cupbearer was going to be restored, everything was going to be okay. Needless to say, he was thinking the very same thing would happen to him. This guy's interpreting dreams, and they sound really good. Now it's my turn. "I also had a dream. There were 3 cake baskets on my head, and the uppermost basket there were all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating it out of the basket on my head." Joseph answered and said, "This is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days, again, just as before. In 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head from you, and hang you on a tree. Does not sound anywhere near as positive as the previous interpretation. The birds will eat the flesh from you. Tragic indeed for the chief baker. He is going to lose his head. He's going to be decapitated, whereas the cupbearer will be restored to his position. And the proof of all this taking place happens in verse 20 onwards. On the third day, which was Pharaoh's birthday. Now, it could have been his actual legitimate birthday, or it could have even have been the anniversary of his ascension to power. He made a feast for all his servants and lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among the servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand, as Joseph had said. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them. A very important thing to take into consideration happens at the very end here, verse 23. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. So after everything that Joseph had done and interpreted, he had forgotten about him and didn't mention him to Pharaoh. What is important to remember here is that in the midst of this, God had not forgotten about Joseph. As we were told in Genesis 39, verse 21, the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love. That had not changed. That would not change. What this brings to our mind, or my mind at least, is how it's very easy for us to forget people we may encounter in our lives. People we may have gone to school with, people we may have worked with, or even gone to church with. And as the years have gone on by, you forget more and more. And then maybe one day you will come into contact with them and saying, oh, aren't you so-and-so who used to go here? Or were you in my geography class? That kind of stuff. Again, it's easy for us to forget other people, strange as it may seem after what Joseph had done and interpreted. But it just goes to show you that we are human, we are fallible. But God, of course, knows all and remembers all and never forgets us. And also, what it also reminds us of is that whole concept of prayer and how we may pray for something and how the response may be immediate from the Lord, how the answer to our prayers might be no, or the answer to the prayers might be not yet. The appointed time has not yet arrived. So we have to be aware of that. Chapter number 41. 2 years had elapsed, so we are told at the very beginning. And Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile, and we hear about 2 dreams here. 7 cows, attractive and plump, feeding in the reed grass. Then another 7 cows, ugly and thin, came up out of the Nile, stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile, and the ugly thin cows ate up the 7 attractive plump cows. Pharaoh was awoken. He fell asleep again. 7 ears of grain, plump and good, were growing on one stalk. Behold, after them sprouted 7 ears, thin and blighted by the east wind. The thin ears swallowed up the 7 plump, full ears. So 2 very similar dreams, different imagery, but nevertheless the same message. Pharaoh was awoken by that, and in the morning, as we talked about before, his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. He told them his dreams, but there was none who could interpret them to Pharaoh. What's important to remember here is what Joseph had said in chapter 40, verse 8. The cupbearer and the baker said to him, "We have had dreams, and there is no one to interpret them." Here's the key part here. Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God?" These magicians, these wise men, were not of the one true God, not of the faith. Therefore, they would have been incapable of interpreting the dreams that Pharaoh had spoken of. Now, at this point, the chief cupbearer had an aha moment. Oh, that's right. There was this guy that I was in prison with who interpreted my dreams. So he acknowledges his offenses today, that he'd forgotten him, how he promised he would tell Pharaoh about him. And he recounts the story about this young Hebrew, a servant of the captain of the guard, Potiphar, a different captain of the guard, as described in verse 3 of chapter 40. Again, if it would have been Potiphar and related to here in that verse, then I'm sure Potiphar would have been related to, which would have made sense given the continuity aspect of it. That's not the most important thing here, but what he does say is what Joseph had told him and how everything had come to pass. Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit. We're told that 2 years have passed. Now Joseph has been spoken about now, and what we can see here clearly is that time has moved very quickly, and that Joseph has been summoned. So when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came in before Pharaoh. Again, this is an important thing to be aware of. Protocol required that Joseph be shaved and clothed before entering into Pharaoh's presence. Again, if I had been for some reason summoned by Queen Elizabeth II to present myself at Buckingham Palace or Balmoral or something like that, then I'm obviously going to have a shower and shave beforehand, which of course I shower every day, although I must admit that I accidentally left my razor in my wife's toiletry bag, so I haven't been able to shave, so I'm going to have to buy another razor now, but whatever, doesn't matter. What is important to be aware of here is that he is now before the presence of Pharaoh. I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it, Pharaoh said to Joseph, and here comes the crucial response. Joseph answered Pharaoh, "It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer." Joseph is not the one who interprets the dreams. It is God who will do so. Be aware of that. It is God's will, God's ability to do so. So Pharaoh recounts the dreams to Pharaoh. Pharaoh recounts the dreams to Joseph, is what I was trying to say. And Pharaoh tells him that the dreams are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is going to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. So 7 years. The 7 lean and ugly cows that came up after the 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blighted by the east wind are also 7 years of famine. There will come 7 years of great plenty through all the land of Egypt, but after them will arise 7 years of famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land. So a significant event is going to be taking place here in the land. The famine is going to consume it. The plenty will be unknown in the land by reason of the famine that will follow it, for it will be very severe. So basically all the good years will be long forgotten, given how harsh this famine is going to be. The doubling of Pharaoh's dream means that this thing is fixed by God, and God will shortly bring it about. There's no escaping it. It is going to happen. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers over the land. Take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 plentiful years, and let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming, and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh for food in the cities, and let them keep it. That food shall be a reserve for the land against the 7 years of famine that are to occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish through the famine. A great amount of detail here in the response Joseph gives to Pharaoh. It pleased him. Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God?" It's important to look at this a little bit as well. Joseph had been enabled by God. Joseph had been empowered by God to be in this situation, to respond in this way. The giving of his spirit upon Joseph, as Pharaoh acknowledges here. Then basically he says, "You shall be over my house, and all my peoples and shall order themselves as you command." This reminds us of the way that Joseph had been viewed by Potiphar, and indeed in the jail as well, and now here on a far grander scale in terms of the whole land of Egypt as well. "I have set you over the land." He took a signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, clothed him in garments of fine linen, and put a gold chain around his neck. The days of the pit were now firmly behind him. He made him ride in his 2nd chariot. They called out before him, "Bow the knee." He was set over all the land of Egypt, with only Pharaoh as his superior. "I am Pharaoh, and without your consent no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." Verse 45, Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphenath Paneah, and he gave him in marriage Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. So Joseph went out over the land of Egypt. What's important to remember here is that he was given this name. It signals that he is being fully integrated into Egypt, into the court, and now that he is to be accepted by the wider community as well. And quite rightly, as someone said in our Bible study today or on Sunday, is that when the future encounter happens with his brothers, then he obviously has this name, so they're not going to know who this Zaphenath Paneah actually is, that it actually is their brother. So we're told about the years of famine, we're told about the storing of all the food, and we hear how Joseph would have two children called Ephraim. Excuse me, that was the second son, and the first one was called Manasseh. Verse 52, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. What this reminds us of is excuse me, the language of being fruitful, which takes us all the way back to the beginning of our hybrid Bible study, all the way back to the beginning of Scripture, as we consider chapter 1, verse 28. So the famine would spread over all the land. Joseph would open all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the earth came to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain, because the famine was severe over all the earth. Excuse me. So people were coming from all over the place because they were so desperate for food, so desperate to have a morsel of bread, so desperate to have something to sustain them. What this would lead to, of course, is Joseph's brothers coming before him, seeking food, seeking provisions, which of course leads us up to some incredible language here and imagery, as I say most weeks, of course, because it is really fascinating and enlightening here in the book of Genesis. So we will see coming up very soon the reunion between Joseph and his brothers, which will open up a whole set of questions. Is that, does he forgive them? Or does he basically say, well, look, you treated me like this, then I'm going to do the same to you, which could be a very normal reaction, especially if we put ourselves in his shoes. So if you have any questions or comments about this or any other Bible study we have done here at St. John's, then by all means send me an email or respond by putting a comment here on YouTube or indeed on Facebook if you so prefer. All that is left for me to say is that I pray that God blesses you richly today and of course every single day, and I look forward, Lord willing, to seeing you this Sunday at church as we mark Pentecost during the church service, and also with our family event, which will be taking place around about midday just after worship. So God bless you all always. Thank you for watching and thank you for participating. Take care and goodbye.